Welcome, Bleacher Report. My name is Garrett Gonzales. You can call me Double G. I am one of the co-hosts of Thompson to Clark, a San Francisco Giants podcast on the BSPN network. And my co-host is Brad Evans. What is up, Brad?
What's happening, everybody? We got our wish list bag wide open. I got so many good players to talk about today. I would take all of them for the Giants right now, but we don't have that many prospects. So
I don't know if Farhan Zaidi would necessarily take all of them, but
we are going. Guy.
Yeah. So what are we going to do here today? Well, we are going to talk about trade targets for the Giants, kind of a wish list of players that we would like to see on the Giants roster to help them in their wild card race here. The National League wild card, there's like 5 teams all vying for just 3 spots. So the Giants are right in the middle and in the thick of everything. We're also going to talk Shohei Ohtani. Now, is he going to get traded? I don't know. We'll see what happens with Shohei, but you kind of have to talk about him when you talk about trade deadline because he's the big fish, and the Angels hold all the keys. They could say, yeah, you know, we want the Juan Soto offer, or they're like, look, we're in the playoff race. And if I'm an Angels fan, I kind of hope that they keep him because do you want to trade Babe Ruth all over again? That doesn't sound very good for your franchise. Yeah. But before we actually get started, there's one thing we have to talk about because Giants news just happened. Someone that Brad and I on our podcast on Thompson to Clark, we've been talking about for years now. Marco Luciano, the Giants brought him up from AAA. He'd only been in AAA for a week. It had only been a week because on the last show that Brad and I did, it had been 7 days since he had been called up, and we were saying how like to see him get 500 ABs in AAA, and the Giants were like, "Nope, we only needed to see him hit a ball 110 miles per hour." So just quickly, Brad, because we'll get to our trade wish list here, but just quick thoughts on Luciano before we go.
Yeah, we did our show last night, and I said I would be shocked if he was up by the end of the season because, you know, we kind of figured the Giants are going to be making a move for a middle infielder, and they still probably will.
They probably
I
will.
would think. Yeah, I mean, you still have, about 4 or 5 days until the trade deadline hits. So at that point, I think they just kind of want to see what he has in the meantime, because what is happening in the middle infield right now with Brett Wisely and Casey Schmidt is not doing it. So the Giants kind of needed to see somebody else. And they thought, well, Luciano, he's on the 40 man. Let's get him up here. Let's see what he can do. But again, last night I said, I'd be shocked if he came up and boom, here he is. And so don't be shocked by anything that Farhan does the rest of this season, the rest of his tenure with the Giants. It's going to be exciting. It's fun. If you're a Giants fan and you've been looking at these prospects for years, it's fun and exciting right now.
And I want to welcome the folks who have who've come into this chat since we started. Just reintroduction real quick. I'm Double G. That is Brad Evans. We are from the podcast Thompson to Clark on the BSPN network. Brad, let's get to our first topic, which, again, I think everybody has to kind of start with, which is Shohei Ohtani. And I think, the first question that you actually have to ask is, are the Angels even going to trade him? And that is, before I'm sure every team has to go with the idea that there is an opportunity. So you got to send your best up, your best trade prospects because that is out there. You don't want him to be traded and all of a sudden go, oh man, we didn't think he was going to be traded. So I put it out in a poll if people want to check that out. But Brad, does Shohei get traded during this trade deadline?
I don't think he does. We've said it before. You've got the best player in baseball, probably the best player in baseball that we've ever seen. And we've been watching baseball since late 70s, early 80s. The Angels need to keep him. And I think mainly because of the gate, the tickets, the sell for the rest of the season, at least. And especially if they want to make a push for him, sign him long-term after this season. If they want to try to get him as a free agent, they've got the negotiating rights with him right now. Shohei wants to go to a winner, and the Angels just aren't that. If he is out there as trade bait at the deadline, I don't think the Giants are in, unfortunately, and I hate to say that, and I hate to be, so negative right off the bat. But the Giants, of all the teams that are rumored, the Giants are the ones that really, really rely on their prospects. As you see, Luciano comes up. He needs to fill a hole in the middle infield right now. He hits the ball hard. So if they're going to go after Shohei at the trade deadline, Luciano is going to be a name that's going to be in there. Kyle Harrison is going to be a name that's going to be in there. Matos, Bailey, all these guys. The Giants aren't going to part with any of these guys. Those guys are long-term plan for the Giants. We're going to be looking at some other players that are definitely gettable for the Giants. But Shohei, I just don't think, even if he's available, I don't think the Giants are going to dip their toes in that water.
Yeah, because of the fact that Shohei is going to be a free agent, you are signing him as a rental, which lessens the value that the Angels will get back. And I think that, so it would probably, for the Giants, would it be Wisenhunt versus Harrison because of that? And then is it Casey Schmidt rather than Luciano? And I think that's where you start. But I'm with you in that I don't think the Angels are going to trade him. Because let's say there's a 30% chance Shohei re-signs with the Angels. You are in the mix. You are 3 games back, whatever the number was that I saw this morning, how far back in the playoff race that they are. You buy so that you make the playoffs. Maybe you win a round. Maybe you win 2 rounds. And all of a sudden, all eyes are on Ohtani and Trout. And that's telling him, hey, this is what can happen. We just needed to get the pieces around you. And then you sell him on the idea of coming back. That's how I would like my team to look at that scenario. But at the same time, if the Angels really don't think he's coming back and, they can get something for him, I just think it's really, 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 it's a bad look for a team to trade somebody who is a historical player. Like, could the Giants have traded Barry Bonds in 1997, right? Like if they were no, you couldn't. No. This is a historical guy who he just becomes your franchise. So he may not have those ties to Anaheim, but still, I think you're right. I would go 100% into the free agent market thinking that you have a shot and you got to, but historically the Giants have fallen short, right? With those big free agents. So what have they learned from these past attempts and what could they learn? Because, you Giants have to think of it in one of 2 ways. A, can we get him? B, we need to keep him away from the Dodgers. Like it's like a 2-prong situation here.
Yeah. And that's one thing is, let's say the Dodgers do trade for him. Well, they're going to lose a lot of their big prospects, but you know what? They're so deep in prospects. It doesn't matter to a team like the Dodgers because then he's now in the organization. You can woo him. You can show him this is what it's like to win. This is what it's like to go to the playoffs. This is what it's like to go deep in the playoffs. And the Dodgers, this is what it's like to lose the World Series. So anyway, as we always like to say, but when you look at a situation like that, you say, well, they're so deep. And that's what Farhan wants to try to build with the Giants. He comes from that organization. He comes from the A's organization. You want to get that really, really deep farm system. And so trading for Ohtani right now really depletes that as the Giants are just starting to kind of get there. And I think it would undo a lot of work. And I don't think that's what Farhan wants to do right now.
Yeah. I'm seeing in the chat, we put a poll up. Are the Angels trading Ohtani? 63% say no, but actually 38% say yes. That's more than I would have thought. So somebody asked about Tim Anderson. We're going to get to Tim Anderson at the end of this. So we have a nice comparison with Tim Anderson as well. All right, so who's number 2 on our list? Ohtani is a clear number 1. Who is the next person that Brad and I are interested in for the Giants? And this is someone who Brad looked up yesterday when we did our show, Thompson and Clark, and that is Marcus Stroman. And the reason I like Marcus Stroman, and we'll look into this a little bit because his numbers are much better than they've ever been for him and pitching in Chicago, which isn't necessarily a pitcher's park. But the thing that I like about him is he has had so many nice things to say about the Giants' attempt to get him previously, and it just didn't work out. But he likes the organization. So I think that's a positive. So when you look at somebody like Stroman, you're bringing in somebody who probably fits in from a personality perspective, enjoys the organization, and who doesn't like pitching in Oracle. So Brad, give me your thoughts on why Marcus Stroman is almost at the top of our wish list here.
Well, I think number one, okay, he pretty much came in. The Giants came in second when they were trying to woo him a couple of years ago. Ended up going to the Chicago Cubs. He kind of liked that situation a little bit better. He thought that they were a little bit further along. Obviously, they're not at this point. The Giants are still ahead of the Cubs in terms of the rebuild, in terms of the the organizational philosophy of getting those young guys up to the majors faster. But what is the Giants pitching identity? It's ground balls. It's not necessarily fireball strikeout. It is ground balls. You've got Logan Webb, who leads the majors in ground ball percentage, and he's at 59, almost 60%. You've got Alex Cobb, who's third in the majors at 57%. Who's number two? It's Marcus Stroman. So you go out and get Marcus Stroman. Now you have the top three pitchers in the majors in ground ball percentage, and that's what the Giants are trying to preach. Keep the ball on the ground, keep the ball in the yard. Stroman doesn't give up many home runs. Is he having a career year? Yeah, he's having a career year. He's got an ERA just barely over 3, made the All-Star game, pitched fantastic again in the WBC like he did however many years ago. What was it, 6 years ago?
Yeah, the last time.
The last he pitched. I mean, he's been around for a long time, and he's a veteran, and that's what the Giants would like to add to their pitching staff. I see a lot of blurbs when I'm looking around about, the Giants are going to be looking for a fifth starter, and like I said last night, who's our third and fourth starter?
Exactly.
I mean, Stroman would slot in there as starter number 3 easily. Because you'd go Webb, Cobb, Stroman, and then after that, it's kind of a hodgepodge. Yeah, we want to see Kyle Harrison come up. We want a healthy Kyle Harrison who is hitting the strike zone, and we haven't seen that 100% yet. And I think we're kind of waiting for that. So he could be your number 4, your number 5. Tonight Ryan Walker is starting, and so we've had a lot of openers, and the Giants kind of want to get away from that. So starting,
and we should ask the chat, Giants fans, are you comfortable with Alex Wood being the innings eater today? I'm not as comfortable. Like he hasn't had that good of season. Actually, the game that I went to a few weeks ago, I thought was maybe one of his better ones, but he's been so inconsistent. So the idea of an opener is to then get to your starter who's going to eat those middle innings. But if that guy's not eating the middle innings, then it's not working no matter, who opens. So I'm with you. If we could solidify, the top 3, Webb, Stroman, Cobb, or whatever order that you like those guys. The only thing about it is you don't really have a left-hander in there,
right?
But hopefully that could be someone like Kyle Harrison, which I think we're crossing our fingers about. And my son sent me a text this morning. He's like, I would have bet money that Harrison would be up before all of these guys who came up, and he's like kind of last. And I was like, yeah, I think the Giants would have said the same thing, but the injury caused him to be delayed a little bit. So one last thing for me on Stroman. There is some luck into his stats if you are heavy into the analytics. The FIP is a little higher by a half a run than his ERA. So there's some of that, but I think being in Oracle would maybe even allow him to keep the numbers that he's had this year. So I'm for it. I like the guy. He seems like a really good fit, and that. So somebody in the chat, I think it was Ricky, he was like, "Can you guys say Luciano's name correctly?" So I think it's Luciano rather than Luciano. So I think I will correct that. Luciano. I think I just like calling him Lucky Luciano. So that's kind of my thing.
Flows much better.
But I did hear Luciano. So we'll go with Luciano here. All right. So who else is on this list? Now, we put this person in the middle because there's like very little chance that this person is going to be traded. Because of the contract situation, how young this person is, the Giants would have to give up a ton. But this is like, if this person was about 5 years older, this would be the perfect person to throw on this team. Ezekiel Duran, Brad. Talk about Ezekiel Duran.
Yeah, so Ezekiel Duran is basically a every position player for the Texas Rangers. A couple of factors. I've seen the name thrown out there. I would love to have him. He's a 290 guy this year, but he hit 237 in his first season of the Bigs last year. He's only 24 years old. It's his first arbitration year in 2027. So lots of control. Farhan would love that, but you've got to give up a lot for that.
Yeah.
And with the Texas Rangers competing and one of the best teams in the American League, they're going to be looking for a frontline starter. They still haven't really replaced DeGrom in the rotation. They'd probably be looking for a solid left fielder, things we just can't give up. We'd have to give up prospects, and I don't think the Rangers are really into that right now. That's not their situation. He's hitting 290, slashing 292, 334, 836 this season, 13 home runs and 277 ABs. This year, he's played shortstop, left field, right field, second base, third base, first base, mainly a second baseman. But that is a Farhan dream right there. That is a Kapler dream. That is a guy that the Giants would love to plug into the lineup somewhere. But again, I just don't see that one happening. But the Giants have such a need for middle infielders. If everybody else is gone and somehow the Giants can work something out with the Texas Rangers, that's a possibility. And I like the guy. I like the way he plays. He's young. He's fiery. Get him in with some veteran hitters in the Giants lineup, and we could see some good things.
Now, this sounds to me like a Bochy problem, because the reason why Duran doesn't have necessarily a single position is because the Rangers have a really good baseball team.
Yeah.
And, you're talking about Seager and Simeon and guys like that. So, yeah, he's the young guy who has got to kind of put his stamp and force the manager's hand to put him. So I'm with you. I don't think that they're probably going to deal him, but he is the perfect type of player for what the Giants like to do. And I just like that name because, it shows that Brad Evans does his homework, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm digging, man. I'm digging.
So we're going to get to our next couple of guys here, but we kind of played it as like a this or that kind of thing. And we'll talk about them in a second, but I just wanted to reference the chat because there's some good names that are going in the chat. There's Cody Bellinger out there who I sort of feel like we already have on our team in Jock Peterson. Sort of similar left-handed bats, though, Jock hasn't had the post All-Star break like we would like to see him. And there's also talk about Tim Anderson, who we're going to talk about here in a second. One that Brad and I talked about last night on our show, Tommy Edman. And so, there's some good names. Keep throwing those names. Very, very interested in seeing who people like. But here's our last. This is our last comparison here, or the last of our wish list. And it is Tim Anderson. But there's another middle infielder by the name of Paul. I've screwed his name up. Is it DeYoung?
I think it's DeYoung.
Okay. Paul DeYoung and Tim Anderson. Now, just on name value alone, right? Tim Anderson is a much bigger name than Paul DeYoung. If you ask, semi-casual baseball fans, they may know who Tim Anderson is. They may not know who Paul DeYoung is. Eno Saris just wrote a piece for The Athletic where he was looking at some smaller deals that could get done. And he kind of tied Anderson to the Giants. And his hypothesis or his question was, which one are you getting? Because that changes the value in what you have to give up. Tim Anderson is having a poor offensive season. Are you paying for this year's poor offensive season, or are you paying for 2 years ago or 3 years ago when he was a better player? We got a funny chat. I'm with Pedro Ellison. No Cardinal crybabies. Yeah, they've definitely been. They've definitely been. An antagonist for Giants historically.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand the Cardinals thing there. But are you paying for Tim Anderson, the All-Star, or are you paying for Tim Anderson, maybe who's a little washed? We don't know, right? Because one season, out of a good career, it could be just, a random season, or it could be telling us something about him as a player. So Tim Anderson, let's actually start with Paul first, though. And I'll start with Paul because I was the one who kind of looked him up yesterday, which is he's a good middle infielder. He's going to help defensively. And the Giants have Brandon Crawford, but as we've seen these last 2 years, this is a different Brandon Crawford. Not only is he not hitting the baseball, he's not able to stay on the field as much as he used to be, which he was such a stalwart in the lineup. So you have, maybe Brandon Crawford is playing half of the games versus all of the games. So you need to pair him with somebody. DeJong could play defense, and so you're talking about ground ball pitchers. You do need a shortstop to play. Casey Schmidt has played a very good shortstop, but he's clearly a much better defensive third baseman. He bails himself out at shortstop because he has such a great arm. But DeJong is not hitting either. He's got some pop. He would actually be tied for the Giants' lead in home runs. So he does have pop, but he's not getting on base and he's not making enough contact. That would probably be someone who Zaid's like, we got to get this guy. So that is one. And now the flip is Tim Anderson, who we've talked about, who is just having a bad year, but is the sexier player. It would probably get the fan base a little bit more excited because they have heard about him. So give me your sort of compare and contrast. And while you're doing that, Brad, I'm going to post our second poll here about who the people watching on Bleacher Report would prefer between DeJong and Anderson.
Yeah, so Paul DeJong is kind of having a little bit of a renaissance, a little bit of a big season for him. He's 29 years old. Club options for 24 and 25 at 12.5 million and then 15 million. So that's nice for the Giants because they can decide, hey, we made this trade for Paul, didn't quite pan out. We don't need him next year. Luciano has become the guy. Tyro is back and he's healthy. That's our middle infield. We're good. The last 3 seasons, he's hit 197, then 157, and this year 234.
Yeah.
Not fantastic. Giants brass likes players who can put the ball in play, who can make contact. OPS plus of 85, then 52, and then this year 95. So almost average. Mm-hmm. He's got 13 home runs, I believe, this season. And defensively, he's good. He's not going to turn heads, but I think the Giants right now are kind of looking for who can we get up the middle who is an offensive up the middle mm-hmm. player. Mm-hmm. And that's why Luciano's here, because Schmidt flails and Brett Wisely is Brett Wisely. And and defensively, they're serviceable up the middle as well. Of course, Casey Schmidt, much more serviceable. So if you can get Casey Schmidt to play some games at third to spell JD Davis, because how many times do we need to see Wilmer Flores at third base before we go? Okay.
Well, it's kind of funny because Wilmer's the only one hitting all those guys. So he's like forcing his hand. He's like, okay, we got to play this guy.
And then you take him out of the lineup.
Yeah. And then you see him running and you're like, man, this brother's in pain.
And it's painful to watch too.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at Paul DeJong, you're looking at those factors. Then you look at Tim Anderson and you go former All-Star, 20 plus home run seasons a couple of times, 0 home runs this season, had a leg issue.
That's so crazy.
It is the most bizarre thing I've seen, but he's hit 290 in July. So things are starting to kind of punch up and turn around a little bit. He does have a club option for next year at 14 million. Then he's a free agent after that at 2025. So the Giants could also decide, look, we went out and we got Tim Anderson. He did us well for the rest of the season. He plugged a hole. He is a fiery dude. He's got a lot of great attitude. He's a bat flipper. I mean, I would love to see him in a Giants uniform. He's one of my favorite players to watch. He's really good defensively. He can play shortstop. He can play second base. So that is a good mix to have. That's what the Giants would love. That's what Kapler would love when he's filling out that lineup.
Especially with Tyro still out, probably until next month, sometime later in the month.
It's probably going to be late August, early September. And then when he comes back, of course, he's not going to be the same Tyro. He hasn't really been the same Tyro since like April, May anyways. But hopefully this time off is going to help him a little bit once he gets the hand healed. So adding Tim Anderson to the mix. Last night I was leaning toward Paul DeJong. Today, if I clicked on that poll, I would be leaning more towards Tim Anderson because I would want to get a player that I've seen have an all-star season, that I know is hitting 290. You got to move the line along. When we're scoring 2 gift runs against the A's like we did last night, you got to move the lineup along. You got to move runners, through the base paths. You've got to score runs, and they're just not doing right now. So a little bit of a boost would help. I like Tim Anderson for that.
Yeah, I think we were both kind of leaning DeJong last night. And it goes back to, Sarah's question is which version of Tim are you paying for? And his contract is very friendly. You're not breaking the bank for him. And, you have some option with what you want to do, depending on what you think about him. And, also there's we mentioned this at the top of the show, there's the Luciano part of this equation. I don't imagine that Luciano's going to come and he's just going to start hitting jacks and start making diving catches all over the place. Like, he's a rookie and he's 21 years old. If we give him that expectation, he is absolutely going to fail in our eyes. But that is also like, they brought him up, so you have these options. And then if you could pull off an Anderson, you're like, wow, now, athletically, we just got a ton better. The possibility of whatever is ailing Anderson and some of the things that maybe the Giants have about 37 coaches. They can fix him. So the people viewing us, they are about 50% higher on Tim Anderson. So 67% of the folks want Anderson versus 6% of the people who want DeJong. There's also lots of Wilmer love in the chat. We love Wilmer too. We just kind of like to make some jokes about him because he's not the perfect third baseman or first baseman. He's the greatest Wilmer that you could ever have. So we love Wilmer as well. So, just as we close down, I want to say thanks to the folks viewing this. I really appreciate you all checking in with us. We hope to do this at some point again, if the Bleacher Report folks enjoyed how we did this. So thank you to those watching. Thank you to those who were chatting, who took the polls. Again, you can find Brad and I. We do a podcast called Thompson to Clark on the BSPN podcast network, Bay Area Sports Podcast Network. We have a YouTube channel. Just go into YouTube and at BSPN. Thompson to Clark on Twitter, BSPN Media on Twitter. You can see our Twitter handles here, our personal Twitter handles. And I loved it. And I hope that we get to do more of this for you all. So for Brad Evans, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.
Peace.